Hi everybody, this is Josh with Josh Wright Piano TV. Today's episode is on scales, and this is dedicated to Tom and George. Both of them recently emailed me just asking for me to make a video on scales. I posted a video a few weeks ago about playing faster, which basically was a video on playing scales. But today I want to introduce scales in a different light, just how I would approach these from the first lesson up through a very advanced technique that you can use on them. So I'll recap a couple things from that other video. So if you haven't watched that one, I would recommend watching it. But the first thing that's so important with scales is to establish the correct fingering, and that's basic. Basically, you want to watch where your fours go, because the fingering in a C major scale, for instance, is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. C major may be a bad choice for teachers to start out with, because it can give the students a lot of leeway to kind of play with wrong fingering, because you could do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 and sound fine. And the students say, well, why can't I do that? Well, you want to establish the patterns of discipline with the correct fingering, so that when you go to do other scales, like something like F sharp minor, harmonic, that you have the right fingering. Otherwise, you can run out of fingers. Okay, that's basic. A couple things that you want to do. I don't know if I've done a video on hand position, but I've made quite a few now. I think we're up to 70 videos, so I'm having a hard time remembering everything I've covered. One thing that I suggest students do from the very beginning is to lay their fingers flat onto the key surface, kind of slide them there in between the black keys, and then pull your fingers back towards your palm. The reason I don't just say curve your fingers or pretend like you're holding an orange or something, or a tennis ball or a golf ball, is that wrist position can be very affected. So you can have that perfect position, but you can have a super low wrist that creates tension right there, or you can have a high wrist that gives you no real finger strength. So that's why I like to just say hold your wrist flat, and then pull your fingers back towards your palm, and kind of like pretend like you're scratching the keys back towards your palm. And you want to keep your fingernails short. So all you girls out there who like long fingernails, it's just not very good for piano technique, so you got to keep them short. And I'm saying, like, not to hurt yourself short, but you want to keep them really trim, because otherwise you can get clicking. Mine are pretty short right now, so you don't hear any clicking. But so that's the next thing, is to establish the right hand position. The next thing I like to present is, besides hands alone to hands together practice, is various types of touches. So the first touch is something I like to call high fingers. Let's take an A major scale, that's fine. So there's two types of high fingers. One I learned from my teacher, who was trained in the Schnabel technique, the German school, and then the other I learned from a Russian teacher trained in Moscow. Both are very, very helpful, and there's just one slight difference. The first one, the one I learned when I was young, is to put your fingers straight up and then come down. So we're having high fingers, and the strength comes from dropping into the keys with a curved finger. You don't want to just be doing this motion with your finger. You want to curve it on the way down. And notice my hand doesn't have a whole lot of tension in it. It looks like I'm holding tension, but I'm not flexing my hand. The difference between good tension and bad tension is that good tension allows you to hold your hand like this. I mean, you have to have some type of muscle contraction in order to even put your hand like this. Bad tension is when you're flexing your hand like that. You don't want to flex your hand when you do this. Lift it, but keep your hand relaxed. And also, never have more than one note down at a time. You can have a millisecond of overlap, but as soon as you play that next note, release your fingers. Okay? The other way of doing high fingers, this is a little harder in the sense that you can create tension a little easier here, but it's just as easy if you apply the same principles. So you keep your fingers curved here, so you have to kind of lift up and then down. quite as much velocity down into the keys if you keep your fingers curved when you're doing high fingers. They're both good to practice. So, and you don't want to be doing these with a fast tempo. You want to keep it in a nice slow tempo for high fingers. I might go this fast. That's my maximum tempo for high fingers, just because it's not an exercise designed to help you with speed. It's an exercise designed to help you with strength, with precision, with clean releases, those types of concepts. Another touch that I give my students very early on with scales is the finger staccato. I think I've talked about the different staccatos in my videos, but this one is a finger staccato. You'll notice very little wrist bounce. The only reason I don't say no wrist bounce is that I don't want you holding your hand so still that you create tension. So basically what you do is you pretend that the piano key is a guitar string and you pluck it. See, so I'm not bouncing like this. Into my palm here, and you don't have to pull it all the way back and touch your palm, just pull it towards it. And what you want to avoid doing is sliding off the keys so much. Again, all of these techniques can be used for different things, so this in itself isn't a bad technique. It's just not good to use on an introductory lesson. It's not really useful. What I like to do when I'm plucking these keys is I like to try to get the part where I'm on my, this is hard to explain, the plucking motion to be maybe a ½ inch long. You don't want to be making these big long strokes again like that, starting from a flat finger and then pulling all the way. You don't want to do that. You want to start from a curved finger and just pull off, okay? I'll tell you the danger of doing that is that you will start, the faster you get with that, the less integrity you'll have in the sharpness of your staccatos. So I see a lot of students saying, I've mastered that finger staccato. That's really terrible finger staccato right there. It's not short at all. Practical example that I reference a lot is the Mendelssohn variations. So you've got to really be moving there, and you've got to train really slowly to get that kind of movement and that sharpness. And even when you're going that fast, you can tell you lose some of the edge on those staccatos. So kind of have that debate with yourself. How fast do I really want these to go? If you're trying to get a piece up to that speed, maybe push it up to the speed you need it to. But if you're just practicing scales, stick with a nice finger staccato with really sharp staccato effects. Okay, the next ones are just some basic rhythmic practice. So long, short is a really easy one, and it's even okay to teach little 5 or 6-year-old kids this. Or someone starting piano for the first time, they can learn this in their 2nd or 3rd week of learning scales. Also, when you're first learning scales, teach the student to do 1 octave first, then 2 octaves, then 4 octaves. I think after 2 octaves you don't necessarily need to go to 3, but you can if you need to. The worst thing that I've done, and I've made this mistake so many times in teaching, and I usually do it as a trial to see if the student can handle it, but sometimes I used to kind of force it when I was a little younger, and I said, keep practicing 4 octaves at a time, you'll get it. And it just was so counterproductive, it wasn't productive whatsoever. And so I just started having students just do 2 octaves with their scales after they mastered 1 octave. And then they can jump to 4 octaves after a few weeks of getting really good at 2 octaves with their scales. So that's a good little piece of advice when you're learning scales. If you're frustrated doing 4 full octaves, just go to 2. So the long, short. Another rhythm you can use is long, short, long, short. So they're in groups of 4. And if you're using the Hanon book, the scales are grouped into little groups of 4. faster video. The whole purpose behind rhythmic work is if you can play these 2 notes fast, or these 3 notes, or these 4 notes fast, then you can basically play the whole passage fast after a lot of rhythmic work. Okay, so that's some more basic things that I introduce. I don't personally, in my teaching, do a lot of scales in thirds and sixths. I think it was George who asked about that. It's good work though, and it's tough even for me. I remember when I was playing the Chopin First Ballade, when I was very first learning, I think I was 14. That is really tough. It's intense, but scales are tough to play in anything aside from octaves because we're so used to doing octaves that it's really easy to get off. And then you end up playing it in octaves, and one hand gets ahead of another. So practicing in thirds is really good, practicing in sixths, and it will also help you master your fingering. I would not recommend doing that if you're struggling with scales and octaves. Don't jump into thirds or sixths as a remedy. It's not a remedy at all. It's much harder. Okay? So the next thing, after my students have got all of their scales to a certain point, or they've gone through all of them and we've worked them up with metronome, I'll introduce the Russian technique of playing scales, which the way I learned, I'm sure there's variations on this, but the way I learned is this. Okay, so basically you go up 2 octaves in parallel motion, out 2 octaves in contrary, in 2 octaves in contrary motion, then up and down 2, out and into, down 2. Okay, one more time, I'll go slowly. We'll do C minor. Come in. Okay, and if you don't practice these, like if I try to F sharp minor right now, it's easy to get off. I remember I was really sharp at that at one point when I'd been practicing it, but it really is helpful. When you're doing scales that have the basic hand position like A major, C major, D major, G major, it's really nice to practice this contrary motion because 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's the same fingering in both hands going in contrary motion. When you're doing something like F sharp minor, it doesn't really work out like that. But that's really another technique you can use to master your fingering on the easy scales. Just do that a bunch of times because your fingering, again, is similar. Whereas with parallel motion, the notes are the same. With contrary motion, the fingering is the same. Okay, so those are some other suggestions. Okay, for you really advanced players, a couple things that I like to do to keep my scales really sharp is I'll get a metronome on at a slow tempo just to recap really good alignment, listening for things, and then I'll boost it up, and I'll boost it up more. I don't really practice a whole lot of scales just every single day. I might warm up with 1 or 2, but at this point my pieces present enough technical challenge that I'll warm up using my pieces. But if I'm just practicing scales, and I've got some real sharp young students that are, hitting the 160 for 4 notes per click, or 176 is, starting to get within reach, possibly, and I have to keep sharp with 176, man, that's really fast. So what I like to do is I like to practice small increments, and this seems like really boring practice, but if you're really attentive to it, it's very interesting. And then just stopping on different notes, so this time I'll stop on the A's. How aligned can I get my scales? Because when you reach for these really high speeds, you want to get them aligned. And then I do a lot of the rhythmic practice as I describe in my Playing Faster video, so like 5, 7, 9 rhythms. That's really tough stuff as well. This has been pretty exhaustive with many different things you can do with skills. If anyone has questions about any of these things I've presented, please email me. Also, if you are interested in private online lessons through Skype, send me an email. It's josh@joshwrightpiano.com. Thanks so much for joining me today.